Hey world, today I'm going to talk to you guys about the past, present, and future of console gaming. Since video games have existed, there's always been a debate about what is the best way to deliver these games. In the early days, you would have to buy entire consoles to place two simple games that were incredibly overpriced. There has to be a better way. Then companies saw the magic of cartridges, which could contain entire games in them. It seems almost silly to us with what are fancy schmancy discs with interchangeable game that we can put in and put out on a whim. These cartridge games allowed companies to expand and make franchises, or series of games involving a certain character. Early stages of hardware, though, limited this, so many companies stuck to sports and simple things like that, because the hardware wasn't available to make amazing games with amazing stories. As designers were trying to be engaging with what little technology they had available, they were still trying to better the technology instead of innovate. For example, Magnavox Odyssey released 3 console-based systems where the games included was what you were stuck with, basically, after Atari introduced a cartridge-based game, running the platform much less diverse than its competitor. Yes, we all know the Atari, but while that was being sold, the console market was flooded with no-names until in 1985, the NES came out and revitalized the industry with the first edition of the RPG Mario Brothers. This game came out bundled with Duck Hunt, and the future looked bright. Sega then jumped in the mix and released the Sega Genesis. This console was famous for its sports games and, of course, arcade simulations. At this time, Sega introduced a trademark character in hopes to compete with Nintendo's mascot Mario. A blue hedgehog named Sonic ran around collecting rings. This game was so successful that a sequel was released for this console. How could you not? Look at these graphics. Skipping ahead 3 years, the NEC Turbo Duo came out. Not gonna win any awards for easiest console to acronym. And a revolution was born. CDs could now be played on this console. This was revolutionary. Data was almost unlimited compared to floppy disks and cartridges. For comparison, you could store about 1.5 megabytes on a floppy disk. The average CD can store about 650 megabits of storage. This allowed developers to be more adventurous and not feel limited in terms of data as long as the console could handle it. There were many failed attempts to integrate this newer CD technology into the somewhat falling behind consoles. Nintendo was smart and partnered with Sony, a revolutionary CD developing company. Together they could have ruled the gaming industry. That is, until Sony wanted a bigger piece of the pie that caused Nintendo to say screw you and go with Philips for its CD developing needs. Sony almost ditched the half-completed project, but thankfully they didn't. Although Nintendo sued on breach of contract clauses, in 1995, the Sony PlayStation was released. In a last-ditched effort to save cartridge games, Nintendo released the N64. This included the trademark Mario included with the console. Other than redesigns, this was the last console to run on cartridges. We've all been there after a long break of playing your system. You'd have to blow in every cartridge before it would work. Yeah, it's not fun. It's borderline annoying. As we enter the 21st century, we find Sony leading the pack with the revolution that is the PS1. This console had some hiccups in its early release due to technical issues, but that was resolved by removing an S-video port left over from Japanese releases. One thing that Sony did right is negotiate publishing rights so that their console only had their games, and other publishers stayed away from other consoles. Later in 2000, Sony released the PS2. This console was notorious for never being in stock in its first months of release. This led to almost as many sales from eBay buyers as Sony itself. Sony signed with publishers to help form staple brands, so it outlasted the competition from Microsoft and Nintendo. Speaking of GameCube, released in 2001, Nintendo released its first, although mini, CD-ROM-based console. The discs were compact, but could store a whopping gigabyte and a half. Also, the discs were almost pirate-proof due to the inverse reading techniques in the system, although hackers will be hackers and eventually found a way around this and pirated it. Later that same year, along came Microsoft. The Xbox was largely a collage of other systems' work, but it was the first to feature online play. This new format, called Xbox Live, had over 2 million subscribers in just the first 4 years. This offered a new level of interaction. Online multiplayer games gave developers a whole new concept to think about when making their games, although I guess it indirectly allowed for bullying and intolerance via games. But it's not their fault. A small group of people suck. You know who you are. Not to be outdone, in 2004, Sony released the PS2. This console was much slimmer and more compact, and one thing that was significant is that the PS2 had backwards compatibility. This added to the reason to upgrade to the system, especially since we all have that one TV that we like to play video games on. Unless you're jerry-rig it, you are forced to play on a secondary TV, on that 13-inch TV found lying on the street corner in 1984. Microsoft responded to this with its latest and greatest console, the Xbox 360. This console features better graphics, a wireless controller with an attached headset to accompany the voice chat servers now on Xbox Live. This game system has been one of the big three since its release, and since it has been out so long, people have found plaguing issues. One well-known issue is the red ring of death. This happens when you go to turn on your system, and there's 3 blinking rings. This means that the internal hardware has failed or melted. This is a guaranteed shipment to the repair shop. Now, back to Sony. While they were busy building TVs, they were also building the PS3. This gaming system was so sought after, people were literally fighting over them like dogs, either paying thousands of dollars for them, or simply beating each other up for the console. Like its predecessor, it offered the ability to play every game in the PlayStation series. Then in 2006, the revolutionary Nintendo Wii came out. This system used a slim controller with a motion sensor attached that hooked up to your TV to use motions instead of joysticks to manipulate characters and perform actions. This is an ambitious concept that was worth the 5 years in between consoles, as the technology is almost seamlessly integrated with the newly improved graphics. While Nintendo has always seemed to have its own graphical feel, this is no exception to that rule. The characters included console you make your own Mii that is almost like your own character. This could have been integrated a lot better, but it's a nice touch. This is a fun concept that is not for traditional gamers. This console is virtually useless if you are lazy and just want to play an FPS simply by pressing buttons instead of aiming your controller like a gun. This is where the Wii sacrifices hardcore gamers for pure innovation. The big three seem to dominate virtually the entire market of gaming. This competitiveness has led to increased quality in the long term, but I'm sure I'm not the only one when I suspect some leak of technology, or shared, rather, on Nintendo's part, because in recent times, Microsoft and Sony have released knockoffs of the Wii's motion gaming that have seemed to take a chunk out of the pie for Nintendo. It is unlikely that we will see a console replace any of the big three anytime soon and come out of nowhere and steal the market. Although, if that happens, I'll be sure to be part of the movement. Nothing against them, I just am not a huge fan of monotony. Thanks for watching this video. There's going to be more videos on the way soon. Be sure to subscribe and like this video. Be sure to leave comments down below regarding the video and any suggestions you have for my next topic. Zebnjeb here, signing off, till next time.